Tully here with another 2-minute tip for ways that you can support your ML students in your classroom. I want to preface this by saying I know for sure this is going to be more than 2 minutes, but I think that it will be helpful to you if you would like some ideas for how to accommodate and potentially modify your curriculum to support your MLs and make sure that they find success. So I just want to start off by saying that this slideshow here was not created by me. It was adapted by me based on one that was created by Susan Ree Schofield and Teresa Lau, who are part of the DEI team at the board office. Okay, so very quickly, I'm not going to go through all of the text here. I just want to talk about some of the acronyms that we use all the time. Sometimes we say ESL, sometimes we say ML or ELL. So what do these letters mean, basically? ESL is not letters that you would use to describe a student. It's letters that you would use to describe a program. So we have ML students who are multilingual or multi-language learners, and they are part of an ESL program or an ELD program. Now, what is the difference between ESL and ELD? ESL programs are for students that have relatively up-to-date education, but they're really just working on their language skills. ELD students, that label is applied to students that have major gaps in their education from their home countries. So there are more modifications that happen to support those students. Okay, so 2 years or more to have gaps in their education to be considered an ELD student. Now this is just going through all that. Okay, if you are not sure whether the student that you have is an ESL student or an ELD student, you can check that in PowerSchool. Some of you or most of you are probably already familiar with the little purple tree next to your student's name. If you were to click on that, it doesn't necessarily say ESL or ELD. You would have to go into a little bit deeper into PowerSchool in order to see this information. So you're going to go to Power Teacher, you're going to click on Student Information, which is the top right. You're going to drop down to where you see step recording, and then right here where the red box is, you want to click on initial step. This is a wonderful place for all of you to look if you have ML students in your class, because it's going to show the results of the very first step test that they did when they first were being evaluated. So you are going to see tidbits and notes from the person that was evaluating them that talks about what level they're at, that talks about what their likes and interests are, that talks about any gaps in education that we might know. So it's really handy to give us some more background information for a student so that we can play detective and figure out what things we can do to help support the student, things that they like, etc. So if you click on that initial step and you scroll down, this is where you will see if they are ESL versus ELD, because it will very clearly say either ESL step 1 or ELD step 1 as an example. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this page right here is because we are talking about the difference between students that need modified curriculum and students that need accommodated curriculum. These are similar terminology that we use when we're talking about students with special needs as part of the special education programming. So if you have any ML students and their step levels are currently at step 1 or step 2, they are eligible based on an APM to get some modifications to their curriculum. So if they're really struggling in your class, you can talk to me, their ESL monitor, and we can talk about some curriculum expectations that we can adjust or perhaps even cut out altogether to make sure that they are better able to find success. So this is going to be for students that are part of the ESL program. Once they get to step 3 and 4, we're no longer looking at modifications. We're just looking at accommodations. So we're not changing the curriculum. We're just giving them extra tools to reach that curriculum that's already stated. And then as they get higher, steps 5 and step 6, really there's maybe some accommodations happening here, but they should be well on their way to doing the exact same work as the rest of the students in your classroom. Now, with ELD students, these are the ones that have significant gaps in their education, 2 years or more. The rule for whether we should be modifying or accommodating their curriculum is going to be different from the students that are in the ESL program. So if you have a student that is ELD, they can be at step 1, 2, 3, or 4, and they still are eligible for modifications. And that's because they have significant gaps in their education. So again, if you have one of these students in your class and you know that they're struggling and you've been trying to accommodate and it doesn't really feel like it's enough, chat with me and we can talk about how we can potentially modify that curriculum to cut out some of those expectations to give them a better chance at success. Okay, I just really quickly wanted to show you this triangulation of assessment image because I think, we should all be triangulating in the best of times, but when we're talking about students that have pretty low step levels, I want to point in particular to this little image here where it says Student C. So for students that have very weak English skills and they are at steps 1 and 2 and we're looking at modifying their curriculum, I think that it's very fair to say that when you are trying to come up with a mark for these students, that the majority of those assessment marks are going to come from observation and not necessarily from products, because as I'm sure you can imagine, for students that have very limited English skills, maybe they can't even write an entire sentence on their own, but that doesn't mean that they don't have great ideas, right? So maybe instead of writing an essay in your class, you're going to talk to them to get their understanding of what your curriculum is. I just want to point out that for pretty much every single curriculum except for English, that those communication skills, things like knowing how to write an essay, are not actually built into that curriculum. It's things that we want them to do, of course, because we want to encourage literacy development. But realistically, take a look at your curriculum and see that if it's mostly knowledge-based curriculum, these students don't need to be writing essays. They can share their understanding of the curriculum with you through alternate means, like chit-chatting with you, or filling out graphic organizers instead of writing essays. There's lots of different alternative products you could be getting them to do. And as I said, maybe it's just going to be a matter of you taking lots of notes through the conversations and the observations that you see them doing in class, and maybe you're going to use those notes to triangulate a mark for them. If you are unsure with how to sort of work with this triangulation, if it's new to you and you're not really sure what kind of tools you could use to do this, as the ESL monitor, I'm so happy to chat with you about different options. Just give me a heads up and maybe fill out my form. Okay, so really briefly here, I already mentioned it, but accommodations are where we are not changing the curriculum, we're just providing extra tools, and modifications are where we are changing the curriculum. Okay, so again, modifications are for ELD students, steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, or ESL students that are steps 1, 2, and 3. So what are some accommodations that you could be using to help support your students? Think of this very similarly as to how you would with students that maybe have a learning disability. So you could give them extra time. They've got all the ideas there, they just struggle getting those ideas onto paper because of the language barrier. You could give them graphic organizers. You could provide word banks and picture dictionaries. So basically trying to isolate key terms that you want them to learn through the word bank, or having also visual aids like picture dictionaries to help them with key vocabulary as well. You could give them that key vocabulary ahead of time, maybe the night before if you have a reading that you're going to do, so that they can do it at home when they have extra time to dedicate towards that translation process. Another accommodation is just allowing them to use translation tools like Google Translate, both in speaking as well as through their writing as well. Because again, you have to remind yourself that if your curriculum is knowledge-based, then you don't necessarily need to be assessing their ability to write an essay, right? You're just looking for the ideas. And in that vein, you could be doing verbal responses with these students instead of written responses, or you could be trying to choose really purposeful peer groupings. So if you know any students in your class that speak the same first language as your ELL or ML student, you could group them together. Or if you have students that you know are just super kind and super helpful and accommodating, you could pair those with your ML students as well. And then when it comes to, if you're doing some sort of Socratic method, if you're standing at the front and talking with your students about an upcoming assignment, you can give them both verbal and written directions. Having that two-pronged approach and multifaceted approach to delivering those expectations. Okay, so there is a new addition to the step line in PowerSchool because, as I said, a new APM has recently come out that says that ELD students and ESL students have the ability to have modified curriculum. Now, I'm going to be supporting with teachers that want to be modifying the curriculum for their ELD or ESL students, but the reason why I want you to see this is so that you can see where we are tracking these modifications. So if you had a student with an IEP, that's where you would see those modifications, right? But because these ESL and ELD students don't have an IEP, all of that tracking is happening right within PowerSchool. And this is how you'll see it. So you're going to go to the drop down under your student's profile, and you're going to click on the tab that says modifications. Now you're going to be listing all of the different classes that they have, because they might have modifications in one class but not another. So for example, a geography class, which is really language based and very heavily language based, there might be more modifications there compared to, let's say, a gym class where there's going to be less reading and writing. So you're not necessarily going to see modifications for all courses. But if you want to double check what the modifications are for a particular student, this is where you would be seeing them. So again, I want to remind you, if you have a student that is struggling and you think that they could really benefit from having modifications, reach out to me and we will come together and devise a plan for that. So here's just another, I will share this PowerPoint presentation with everybody as well, but here's just a quick little guide to show you how you could take some of these very characteristic verbs that we would use as teachers, things that we would ask students to do, and how you could simplify the language a little bit. This is more here, thinking verbs. Okay, here is an example of modified curriculum. So this is coming from CGC 1W, which is the grade 9D stream geography class. Down the second column here, you're going to see what the original curriculum expectations are. And then on the right, you're going to see how we could potentially modify that expectation. So for the very first one, A1, which is geographic inquiry, we can see that it says, use the geographic inquiry process and concepts of geographic thinking when investigating issues related to Canadian geography. Now, with this particular example of modification, we are not taking out this curriculum expectation, we're just simplifying it and making it less. So instead of talking about issues, plural, we might be choosing one issue in particular. So they're still, meeting that general expectation, but they're having less examples that they need to be responsible for demonstrating towards you. Now in this second one, strand B, where it says B1, characteristics of Canada's natural environment and the impact of physical processes, we are going to see that we have omitted the second half of that curriculum expectation. So the part where it's talking about analyzing the role of physical processes. Here's another example for science. Again, I'm going to share this presentation with you so that you can look at this in more detail, but at the end of the day, I want to have you rest assured that if we are looking at potentially modifying curriculum, this is not something that you will be doing individually. This is going to be my job, and it's going to be something that I do in conversation with the classroom teachers and department heads. So you don't have to necessarily be worrying yourself about how you are going to modify the curriculum. You just have to recognize that the student is struggling, and then you need to reach out to me, and then I'll make that my business, okay? So really quickly, some language strategies that you could use for Tier 2 vocabulary words. So Tier 2 vocabulary words are essentially like we're getting towards more jargon that you would see as opposed to just everyday language. So just making sure that you are giving students opportunity to practice these words, giving visuals wherever you can. So we are all language teachers in all of our subject areas, even math teachers. There is jargon and math language that you will be responsible for having taught to these ML students. So that's it, 13 minutes. I told you it was going to be more than 2. I know you hate me, but hopefully this has been helpful. And of course, if you ever want more examples, more details, suggestions for more tools, I am happy to help you with that. You just need to reach out. Okay, well, hopefully this helps, and I'm sure that all of you guys are just already really amazing at this, and we're all working together towards student success. So let's get these kids some credits. All right, have a good one.